What up, squad? What's going on? Today we're diving back into the NFL draft player profiles, and we are looking at Alabama quarterback, or former Alabama quarterback, Mac Jones. This breakdown was a little bit different than the first ones I did. If you haven't watched those breakdowns yet, I'll link them up above. We started with Zach Wilson, then we dove into Trey Lance, and the biggest difference is with Zach Wilson and Trey Lance, there's a certain bit of unknown with those guys. Versus with Mac Jones, a lot of his game is what you see is what you get. He obviously won a national championship and played for the mighty Alabama Crimson Tide, which get a lot of TV time. So if you're a football fan, you've likely seen Mac Jones' game. Yes, he doesn't have the sheer number of starts like a lot of the other quarterbacks in this draft class, but he was manning the ship with the most high-profile college football team, so hard to hide anything about his game when you're playing for Alabama. It was also unique because I got a soft spot for guys like Mac Jones, for true pocket passers, guys that can't really rely on their legs and aren't maybe the flashiest and are just kind of old school, old-fashioned quarterbacks, true pro-style quarterbacks. And he played for my old head coach, my old play caller, Steve Sarkisian. So when I watched his games, a lot of the concepts, a lot of the ways that they're getting in and out of plays and how the offense operates, I can relate it back to when Sark was calling plays for me. I'm sure it's evolved and sure it's a little bit different with Najee Harris and Devontae Smith back there as well when you have those playmakers at Alabama. But all that aside, it was cool for me. Mac Jones, hey, he had a way better career than I ever had in college. But when I'm watching the film, I see bits and pieces of my game a little bit. But you guys know the deal with these player breakdowns. I give you a few things I like to start, and then I dive into areas of concern as well. We're really diving in today, getting into the nitty-gritty, breaking down Mac Jones, former Alabama quarterback. Let's get after it. The first area of Mac Jones' game that jumps out to me is how he throws the intermediate routes. It's not necessarily arm strength, it's not necessarily accuracy, which is what I've done in the past in terms of strengths that jump off the page at you right away with other guys. With Mac Jones though, intermediate routes. I feel like he has a great grasp on timing, on throwing guys open, and just concepts in general. You can tell when you turn on the film, Mac Jones knows why a play is getting called. He knows his duty. And so far in this draft season, we've been hearing a lot of Tom Brady comps with Mac Jones, which is playing with fire a little bit. I know a lot of football fans in years past were annoyed with all the Patrick Mahomes comparisons that everyone was getting thrown out there because it's like Pat Mahomes might be the best quarterback ever when it's said and done. So the fact that someone, just because someone's running around in the backfield making crazy throws that they're Patrick Mahomes, that seems a little crazy. And so I always hated that a little bit. And once again, it bothers me a little bit that Mac Jones is getting the Tom Brady GOAT comparisons. But the reason he's getting that from most people is because of the mobility, right? You're seeing a guy back there, there's no chance Mac Jones is running under 5 seconds in the 40-yard dash. And when that happens, it's Tom Brady. If you're not mobile, your game's not flashy, it's not like you have an absolute cannon for an arm, but you just find a way to get completions, get wins, and just get the job done, well then the comp's Tom Brady. Which I get it, I see the comp, don't get me wrong, but I say all that to tell you guys, this to me is the aspect that gets overlooked when you compare Mac Jones's game to Tom Brady. It's the intermediate routes. That's where Tom Brady has made his money. He's got a great sense of timing, throwing guys open, he's never late with the football, and it's just an overall sense of they're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They know the concepts, they play within the system, and they get the ball out of their hands. And he can layer the football. When you talk about intermediate routes, having touch, being able to throw 2 balls and layer the football over linebackers, under safeties is vitally important. And Mac Jones does that very, very well.
After a short gain here, it's 2nd down and 7. Jones firing far side, and he got Devontae Smith again.
And I gave away my second point that I like about Mac Jones' game, but that's his ability to throw the ball with touch. Because of Alabama's scheme, this was something that Mac Jones was forced to do a lot. When you're doing a lot of Najee Harris running on 1st down and little bubble screens to get the ball in Devontae Smith's hands on early down situations, then as the quarterback, it's on your shoulders in 2nd and long, but especially on 3rd down, to execute those concepts that throw the ball from 7 yards to say 20 yards down the field. That's what I talk about when I say intermediate routes. And because of Alabama's flow on offense, Mac Jones was forced to make those throws consistently throughout the game. We're talking play action overs. We're talking dig routes. We're talking threading corner routes in between the cornerback and the safety. And I just said over routes earlier, but climb routes as well, if you want to use a different term. All of those types of routes were something Mac Jones was asked to do frequently in Alabama's system. And to complete those throws and consistently put up the big numbers that Mac Jones did last year, you have to be able to throw the ball with touch. And when you project Mac Jones forward to the NFL, him getting with a run-first, play-action team that will be conducive to throwing a lot of intermediate routes and being able to rely on a run game, that to me is where Mac Jones can find the most success, especially early on, and especially because that's in line with what he was asked to do at Alabama.
Got 2 today. Mac Jones to the back corner. Touchdown, Alabama. And it's Devontae.
But the third aspect I love about Mac Jones' game, and it's one word: leverage. Mac Jones has a great knack for understanding leverage and throwing his guys open. If that football lingo's gibberish to you, to explain it a different way, when the defensive back is on the right side of the receiver, Mac Jones has a great job of throwing it to the left side of the receiver. And vice versa, when the defenders trail him on the left side, Mac Jones has a great job always throwing the ball to the right. And this whole leverage factor that I'm talking about might be the most interesting factor to me in this breakdown, because of all the teams in the NFL, there's going to be some that turn on Mac Jones' film and say, oh, anyone could have thrown to those guys, right? He's got the best receivers in the country. I'm not going to spend a top-end draft pick on him because you could put any quarterback back there. There's going to be a portion of teams that fall into that family. But there's also going to be teams that turn on the film and see what I'm talking about right here with Mac Jones' ability to throw guys open and use defenders' leverage against them and say, wait a sec, this guy wasn't relying solely on elite playmakers. Don't get me wrong, it certainly was an advantage for him last year. He was forced to throw guys open. Oh, he was playing some elite secondaries in the SEC. Man, I keep seeing completions that are contested, yet he's finding a way to put the ball in there. I kind of like this guy. His receivers might not be completely carrying him. There's going to be some teams that fall into that family as well. What's the percentage of that? I'm not sure. We'll see on draft day, but as I've said in every one of these videos, only takes one team. So as long as there's one team in this family over here that believes, hey, Mac Jones, this dude can throw the rock, that's all that matters for him. But when you turn on the film for Mac Jones, there's plays that pop that not every quarterback in the country could make those throws. And I don't care if you have Alabama receivers, it's still an impressive throw. And it's because of Mac Jones' ability to understand and see defenders' leverage and throw the correct ball accordingly. The last positive factor I want to highlight for Mac Jones is execution. And it might not be as thought-provoking as some of these other factors, but I feel obligated for historical purposes to put it in this breakdown. And what I mean by that is if we fast forward 10 years and Mac Jones is a year-over-year Pro Bowler and we say, oh, how do we not see this coming from Mac Jones? I want this factor documented. And what I mean when I say execution is when you turn on the film for Mac Jones, yes, he's not overly athletic. He doesn't have an extremely strong arm. Yes, he has great playmakers. But at the end of the day, he executes the concept consistently on every rep throughout the game. I watched 3 full games and more highlights, and it is very hard to find a missed read, a wild throw, or any of that. When the QB coach gets with his quarterbacks in the QB meeting room at any level of football, you always install the play on paper, right? And you talk through where the ball would go under each coverage, and if this happens, you go here, and if that happens, you go here. But when you put the pads on and you get on the field, it never goes exactly like you draw it up in the QB meeting room. But with Mac Jones, he's a QB meeting room quarterback. I don't know if that makes sense, but what I mean by that, what the QB coach is drawn up in the QB meeting room, Mac Jones just executes. It's not always flashy, it's not always absolutely perfect, but he consistently finds a way to just execute what the coach wants him to do. And the reality is that is the most important quality a quarterback can have, to just consistently execute the play that is called, get the ball out of his hands, and just play point guard back there in the pocket. All right, so those are the points I like about Mac Jones' game, but I know what you guys really want. You want to know, all right, Max, what do you not like about this Jones character? If my team drafts him, what do I need to be worried about? And the first factor that jumps out to me as an area of concern is Mac Jones can get long with his base. My quarterbacks know what I'm talking about. When your base gets long, you'll also hear people say overstriding at times. To me, it's a little bit more than just that with Mac Jones. Spoken from a guy who also had a tendency to overstride when he threw the football and also had a tendency to get long with his base. So when I saw this factor from Mac Jones, it hit home for me. But when I say long base, what I mean is just when your legs start getting outside your body and you're not as compact in the pocket. And what that leads to is just inefficiencies with your throwing motion, one. Two, can lead to sloppy footwork, right? If you get overextended and then you have to move again, that can be really hard to do, especially when you're not the best athlete like Mac Jones. But third and most importantly is it can lead to big time accuracy concerns. If you overstride, then your shoulders start to dip or they start to raise or you start getting all out of whack, and that's ultimately where you can become inaccurate with the football. Not to mention you can lose velocity off the football, right? If you're getting overextended and you're not able to get everything into the throw, you're not able to be a true boxer and stay compact with your throwing motion, that's where juice can fall off the football. And this to me is a big deal when you start evaluating Mac Jones's game, because when this happens, it's because things are speeding up on him, right? He's either late on a read, defenders are getting in his way and he's forced to move. His base gets long when things start breaking down a little bit. And when you talk about jumping to the NFL, where windows are going to be tighter, athletes are going to be better, things aren't going to be as perfect as they were at Alabama, how does this negative tendency for Mac Jones play out in the NFL? And it's actually super funny because I noticed this factor, having been guilty of it at times in my career. And so I jotted it down. I was like, all right, I want to tell you guys about Mac Jones's footwork, overstriding, not getting his bases getting long a little bit. And then I was watching interviews of Mac Jones when he went on the Dan Patrick Show, and he admitted to this poor tendency that he has. Check it out.
I could have squeezed it in there, and my feet were actually kind of, like you said, they were quick, and maybe I was a little bit off balance. You know, this whole game, my feet were a little bit wacky, but I've been on that this week. You know, sometimes you just get so, quick with it, and they just start firing.
But it's no secret, Mac Jones knows it's a thing. NFL teams are going to know it's a thing. I'm sure Sark and the Alabama coaches knew it was a thing and trying to ingrain it out of him during his time at Alabama. He still has work to do, getting along with his base, not staying compact. And as I say that, there's probably a few guys that say, Max, really? Wide base is the first concern you have about Mac Jones, not mobility and the fact that this dude's going to run a 5.3 40 on a good day. That's not your first area of concern? Touche, I see you for that. And that's why I'm going to talk about it right here as the second area of concern is Mac Jones's mobility. That's the obvious one, right? That's the one everyone's going to talk about. There's no secret there. In terms of mobility, when you compare him to guys like Zach Wilson or Trey Lance, not even close in terms of what he's able to do with his legs. But we also know that there's been plenty of successful quarterbacks that can't run a great 40-yard dash. And I love me some pocket passer quarterbacks. And so it pains me a little bit to get on a quarterback about mobility issues. We've hit halftime in this video, and if you've been liking the content, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. And while you're at it, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button as well, it really gets the channel off the ground. But it's easy to just say mobility and have that be a weakness and move on. But I want to dive deeper. I want to show you guys a couple examples on tape where mobility or lack thereof hurt Mac Jones's game and will continue to be a factor in Mac Jones's game. Let's check out a couple plays and I'll get up on the whiteboard and show you guys what I'm talking about.
Jones rolls and then dives forward.
I feel like oftentimes when we say lack of mobility, we just think, all right, now you just can't call zone read and you can't do a lot of the Lamar Jackson, Michael Vick type stuff with your offensive scheme in terms of how you call plays. But there's more to it, especially on normal down and distance plays like the example you just watched right there. And I'll go to the whiteboard and break it down further. As you guys just saw, that play against Texas A&M results in a sack for Mac Jones. If Mac Jones has more mobility, and I'm not even talking full-on dual threat, it doesn't have to be a sack. Alabama's in a 2x2 structure, tight end off the ball. They're going to give a big run fake from right to left. They're going to slide the tight end back from left to right and into the flat. And Mac Jones is going to, what ends up being a half roll, but it should have been a full roll. And the sack happens because Alabama blocks down, leaving this end man on the line of scrimmage unblocked. It's Mac Jones's job to account for this end man with his legs or navigate him with the throw. This Mike linebacker does a fantastic job of recognizing the play, and he runs right away with this arrow route or this slide route by the Y. So the Y is not there. And so his second progression, the F on this 10-yard speed out, is open. Actually wide open. But Mac Jones is not able to get there because this end is all up in his face, having gone unblocked, and because Mac Jones doesn't have the mobility to escape him out this way. Not everything's going to be perfect. It's not always going to be a perfect line out this way and everything's all great in the pocket. No, sometimes you do have to trace back, get more depth on your roll to evade this end. Mac Jones doesn't have that mobility, so he's forced to just kind of protect the ball, and it goes for like a 2-yard sack, and nothing happens. The elite quarterbacks, the big-time growth would be if Mac Jones starts half rolling and he realizes, oh man, my mobility's not there, I can't get past this end, to stop on a dime and throw it before the receiver even gets out of his break and lace one right here from the pocket. Begin to half roll, hitch up right away, or plant that back foot and drive this out route back here. It doesn't happen for Mac Jones, and my goal with drawing up this play is it's a tangible example where if he had more mobility, you'd love to see this completion happen because he's open, or just throw the ball out here. And as a play caller, it's something that goes through your mind when you call a play like this, is now that I know it got sacked, some of these movement plays become a lot harder to call throughout the game.
Billingsley in motion. Jones looking the other way. Running out of time, and down he goes.
This is a right hash call. I should put hash marks right there. And because this is a unique scheme, unique setup, that tells me that Sark is seeing something on film. He's trying to attack something. Putting only a tight end to the field, leaving all this space, putting your 2 receivers there, they're trying to attack something, or there's a method to the madness. And these 2 big-time receivers do a switch release off the ball. Mac Jones is glued to their side. You can tell, man, they've been dialing up this shot. In my guess, this is a concept they practiced all week, just waiting for the right time to call it. But if you're Mac Jones, he knows he doesn't have mobility. And so when you don't have mobility, you gotta know where your checkdowns are. And this concept has 2 very friendly checkdowns. The F on this swoop motion, and he's gonna operate out here in the flat, and then the R is swinging out here. And so if you're Mac Jones, this is a very easy read. I'm looking to my right, I'm trying to hit the home run shots with these 2 guys. Trying to get 2 up on the safeties, force him to make a decision. But I also know right away in my mind, if this is 1A and this is 1B, the solidified number 2 is checking the ball down to the back. This sack should never happen. And it's kind of twofold, right? If Mac Jones is dual threat, he probably doesn't get sacked. He probably finds a little lane up there and gets a nice little gain. But the other piece to that is if you know you're a pocket passer, you also have to know where your checkdowns are, know where your safety valves are. And this to me is a very easy read where the true touchdown, checkdown mentality, which Peyton Manning and Tom Brady have made an absolute Hall of Fame career on. If the touchdown's not there, know where your check down is, get the ball to your hands, can't take sacks, especially when he's right next to you and he's open. With the third area of concern I have for Mac Jones, and that is you do not see a lot of quick passing game from Mac Jones at Alabama. This kind of came as a surprise to me, right? When I turn on the film, I just figured, especially in 2020 college football, that you would see a lot of quick pass game, quick slants, outs, hitches, those type of routes. Mac Jones was not asked to do a lot of that at Alabama. And there's going to be some of you guys that say, no, Max, I saw some bubbles and some smokes and all that. You're right there. What I'm talking about is the time quick game. It's not just throwing alert tags to the outside quickly. I'm talking about reading corners and linebackers leverage right away and getting the ball out accurately on time with slants and out routes and hitches. And you see it from time to time, but when comparing to, say, a guy like Zach Wilson, the amount of quick passing game is noticeably less from Mac Jones. And the reason why this is the case to me is quite simple. On early downs, Alabama's bread and butter was running the rock with Najee Harris and doing pass concepts off of that. They didn't really need to have the quick passing game, hitches, slants, outs, be a fundamental piece of their offense because their offense is a run-first offense and then let's throw off of it. And so it's one of those things you can't necessarily fault Mac Jones for this because he just wasn't asked to do that much of it. But depending on where he goes in the NFL and the offensive scheme that comes along with it, that could totally change things. And so if I'm an NFL GM, NFL scout going to Mac Jones's pro day, I'm having him do the quarterback version of middle infield drills. And what I mean by that is when second basemen and shortstops have to turn to and quickly flip their base and get the ball out in a hurry and be very compact with their motion and operate in true quick game fashion, I want to see Mac Jones do that. In large part because there wasn't a ton of quick game on film, and we talked about the concerns I have with Mac Jones's base. So show me, Mac Jones, on your pro day that you can operate that kind of drill work and really test his quick release, his footwork, tying it all together, and just operating smoothly while doing all of that. And this might be an obvious statement, but the lack of quick game isn't as big of a concern as, say, let's say there was just no downfield passing. That, to me, would be a bigger area of concern because the throw is harder to execute. Quick game is easier to execute, obviously, because the routes are shorter. So I'm confident this is something Mac Jones can grow into, but when you haven't seen it on film consistently, and knowing that Mac Jones could go to a different offensive philosophy in the NFL, it's an area of concern I got to bring up. The two last areas of concern are pretty obvious, so I'll rapid fire them. And those of you guys that have watched my other breakdowns, I've shed light on these two factors before, so the logic is still kind of in the same lane there. But the first one is the average level of difficulty for each completion Mac Jones makes in college. This is the common criticism, right? When you have Alabama receivers and they're going up and making big time plays for you, and you have Najee Harris in the backfield, and you get favorable defensive looks as a result of that, your life's just going to be easier as a quarterback. And so when you look at the average level of difficulty for each Mac Jones completion, relatively speaking, it was not that high. And so when Mac Jones makes the jump to the NFL and windows are tighter and his 10 teammates next to him aren't better than the 11 guys across the ball, how does that work for Mac Jones? Yes. And the last little area of concern is throwing on the run. And some of you guys might view that as redundant to mobility and some of the concerns I had about Mac Jones's base. I view it differently. I think you can be effective at throwing the ball on the run, but not be that mobile. But Mac Jones is not mobile, and when you turn on the film, he is not very fluid when throwing the ball on the run. And to double down on that, you see very, very, very few throws on the run from Mac Jones. And so if Jones goes to a big bootleg team or a big outside zone, heavy play action team where he's going to have to use his legs, and even if it's not zone reading the end, he's still going to have to move in the pocket. That's to me where Mac Jones could be tested. And as I said that out loud, I realized I kind of forgot another factor in that Mac Jones doesn't have that many college starts. Yes, he's got a national championship. Yes, he dominated last year. But in terms of sheer number of reps, he doesn't have nearly as many as a guy like Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson. So that's kind of my full scope on Mac Jones's game, the good and the areas of concern. And when I was prepping for this video, I knew ultimately I was going to have to kind of wrap it up and tell you guys, all right, this is what I think of Mac Jones's game. And it's hard because I can see both sides. I can see the side of he was just a system quarterback in college, executed what he needed to do, but nothing special, and he's not really an NFL quarterback. And I can see the other side of, man, this is a very productive quarterback. He does everything you ask of him. Yes, it's not flashy, but he gets it done. And so ultimately for me, it's gonna come down to the intangible aspects for Mac Jones, as well as the scenario that he's drafted into. But scenario is a factor you could say for all of these quarterbacks. If you go to a crappy team, crappy organization, don't get off on the right foot, your career can go down one lane. And if you get with a team that has a good defense, a good run game, coordinators in place, good franchise, you might never look back in 15 years down the line, you got a couple Super Bowl rings. And so you can make that point about every quarterback, but double down on it for Mac Jones. He's going to need pieces around him to find success, especially early on in his career, why he needs to find confidence. To get a better sense of his intangibles, I went back and watched a bunch of Mac Jones interviews. I watched the Dan Patrick one, I watched one with Matt Leinart to get a gist of, all right, Mac Jones, what kind of dude are you? And I walked away really impressed. I love his competitive spirit and how he believed in himself and stuck it out at Alabama, and obviously that worked out for him. And I also like how he doesn't hide from any of the realities of his situation. He embraces the fact that his teammates were unreal. To me, that was refreshing because a guy in his position might fight back against that narrative a little bit. I'll actually show you the clip right here that I just watched.
How many touchdowns do you think I could throw in a game with your wide receivers? Okay, when everybody's healthy. I mean, let's just be honest, Mac. I know you've had a great year, but I mean, I'm looking at the guys you're throwing to. I got to believe I could get maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns in a game.
Oh, easily.
Like against, let's say I'm facing Ole Miss or Mississippi State. Like I should be able to get 1 or 2, right?
Yeah, I mean, our guys are making plays and they're getting open. So I'd assume if you can throw it past 10 yards, you'll at least give them a chance.
No, I can sling it. I can give you probably 50 yards if I need to.
There you go.
And those guys are wide open too. I mean,
yeah, they are wide open. I mean, that's their job.
So I like that piece, and he also made fun of himself a little bit when talking about his mobility with Matt Leinart, which to me just shows confidence that he has in that he doesn't need to act like someone that's not himself. So I don't know the guy personally. I've only watched interviews, but from the intangible aspect with Mac Jones, he's got a thumbs up for me. We can break down all the film we want, but who Mac Jones is as a dude could be 50% of whether or not he finds success in the NFL. But there you guys have it. There's my Mac Jones breakdown. I got a little bit of a soft spot for Mac Jones because his game reminds me a little bit of my game. I was more athletic than him though. I'm giving myself that. Drop a comment down below if you disagree, if you think I'm giving myself too much credit. But I like his game. I like his story. I think it's awesome that he battled it out at Alabama because I know a lot of guys in his situation probably would not have taken the steps that he did. So it's cool to see him get to this point. My gut says Mac Jones will find his name being called in picks 20 to 30. A team that maybe has an older quarterback that could look to stash Mac Jones for a couple years, allow him to mature, allow him to grow. That to me is a scenario that I could see Jones going to. This Mac Jones breakdown is part of a series I'm doing of 2021 NFL Draft QB player profiles. If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe down below to not miss any more of these videos. I've also broken down Zach Wilson and Trey Lance, so be sure to check those out if you have not already. Would mean a lot if you considered hitting the like button down below. It really helps this channel get off the ground. I'll see you guys back here for another breakdown. My name is Max Browne, and thanks for watching.